your options that are vested, you don't get them because you're under 50. So I walked away and I was thinking to myself, well, all I had to do was stay another 3 or 4 months, and I had well over $1 million in what the options would have been worth when AG Edwards was bought out by, I believe it was Wachovia, and then Wachovia was bought out by Wells Fargo. So I was kind of bummed out about that, but within, 8 months or 10 months, Wachovia went under and the options became worthless. So I didn't feel so bad, but that was certainly against consensus. People told me I was, absolutely out of my mind, that I'd leave the job that I had, leave the country based on, what people said could never happen, which of course it did.
This is Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Little by Little. This, I know, will be my favorite that I've ever recorded. With me, I have my longtime buddy and travel companion, Bill Holter. This is going to be a good one. We're gonna do something different this time. We're gonna stay away from economics and finance and the markets, and we're gonna focus on Bill, because there's been so many times that I wanted to let people know what Bill is really like. I think it's about time people get to see the real side of Bill. And Bill, I've known you a long time, and I've seen you do some pretty wild things. Trips to the Masters, sitting at the bar with you, starting out by doing shots of tequila where you wanted a lime and I called you Buttercup, only then to try and keep up with you shot for shot with TX whiskey. I woke up feeling like a pile of shit, and you woke up, in fact, I think I threw up all night long, and you woke up looking like a bouquet of roses ready to go. I think I dragged myself to the first tee at the Masters. Somehow, some way made it through, but you smiling and laughing at me the entire way. You're the guy who's been riding horses bareback in 100-degree weather in Texas and calling out Wall Street like no one else would, even predicting markets almost like a psychic with a Bloomberg terminal. You're someone who I respect a lot. You're someone who I consider a dear friend and would do anything for. So we're going to dig into all that. But before we dive into that, let's just go back just a little bit. Some of the stories that you told me, I think people need to know. So let's start with hockey, something fun. How'd you get into hockey? Because, well, first, even before I go there, you're kind of, well, I used to call you a cowboy, and you'd say, don't ever call me a cowboy, call me a horseman. But the real question is, how did a Yankee from Connecticut end up as a horseman in Texas? That's where we're going to go with this. But let's start with your time in Connecticut and your love of hockey. Tell me a little bit about what kept you lacing up the skates all those years and your beginnings in up north.
Yeah, I grew up in Trumbull, Connecticut. Started playing hockey when I was 6 years old. My dad was a hockey player. He grew up in Boston, and his home ice in high school was the Boston Garden. My dad, God rest his soul, was my best friend, best mentor, best coach I ever had. And he knew which buttons on me to push. He knew how to get the best out of me by basically challenging me. So I played hockey for 14 years. I played varsity my freshman year at University of Connecticut. Me and another guy, we were the only two walk-ons who made the varsity team. And I'll just give you two stats because this is who I was, and I guess I still am. One game, we lost 10-1. And our goalie he blocked 100 shots. And me as a defenseman, I blocked 27 shots, which is pretty much what a goalie blocks. I mean, I was peppered. I was so black and blue the next day, not even funny. And one other stat, and we had a maniac statistician for our high school team. One of the stats was how many hits. And our team had 90 hits, and I had 60 of the 90. So, oh, and I should say, people who don't know me or see me in person, I'm small. I'm not quite 5'8". I think I was maybe 160 pounds, and played defense my whole life. And every coach I ever had said, "You're too small to play defense." And I said, "Let me play one shift. And if you still think I'm too small, I'll go play, left wing, right wing, whatever." And my entire career, I played defense. My sophomore year in high school, where I made honorable mention all league, I was the second smallest guy in the entire league.
Didn't they have to protect you one of those games that leaving the arena?
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, not once, but twice. I needed a police escort to get out of an opposing arena.
Why does that not surprise me? I mean, there are times that I've been with you at a bar where I thought we would need a police escort out of the bar, but luckily that never happened. And that's probably because you have fists that feel like bricks. And I can't even explain that to someone who doesn't understand what I mean. Your love tap, your hug is like a punch in the arm like that. Your hands literally feel like they're made of stone. I've never felt anything like it, ever. Maybe that's because you broke them so many times. And you told me once that martial arts were a real turning point in your life.
Right.
What was going on at that time, and how did that change your path? How'd you get into martial arts? Tell us a little bit about that.
I started martial arts when I was 19. I played, like I said, I played varsity hockey 1 year, my freshman year. And then out of 13 freshmen that made the team, I mean, it was only a 20-man team. So out of 13 freshmen, only one person finished his senior year, and there was a coaching staff problem. They wanted us to play Russian style hockey, and American kids don't play Russian style hockey. So anyway, my sophomore year in college, I started training martial arts. And it truly was a turning point in my life. I grew up, and I guess I'm going to spill some beans here. I grew up kind of an angry kid. I had an alcoholic as a mother. I figured out she was an alcoholic at about 8 or 9 years old. And it was not a great childhood. My dad did the best he could to hold everything together, but I grew up as an angry kid, and I was willing to fight at the drop of a hat. So I started training martial arts. My teacher was truly a turning point in my life. I learned at that point, don't start no shit, there won't be none. And I mean, physically, I was good. I played soccer, so I was really good with my feet. But the problem was here. The problem was in my head. And he in the 3 years that I trained with him, he really grew me up. And I learned, you said we go into a bar and you're wondering if we need a police escort. No, I'm not a bar fighter. I'll stir things up, but confident enough to walk away and laugh, because I knew what I could do physically, and there was no reason to do anything. So that was really a turning point in my life. And I grew up more in those 3 years than I did in the previous, whatever it was, 18 or 19 years. And I am still in touch with him. 45 years later.
Didn't you fight in Madison Square Garden?
I did. I fought one match actually in the Felt Forum where Ali and Frazier fought, which to me, I thought that was cool.
You mentioned stirring things up in a bar. There are about 5 things that come to mind, 4 of which I cannot say on this show. But one, I'm like, don't do it, Bill. Don't do it. Don't do it. And you got this big smile on your face. We were about 7 or 8 shots into a PX whiskey, which you turned me on to, which is the finest whiskey I've ever had. You turned me on to that at the Masters. I said, don't do it, Billy. Don't do it. big smile. And you had just written an article about a girl with a nose ring and cheese dip hanging from it. And it just so happened that the bartender, this nice gal, had a nose ring in. Why don't you pick up where I just left off?
Well, basically, I told her about the article that I wrote, and I said, that's, the reason you shouldn't wear a nose ring is because if you get cheese on it, you won't know and nobody's going to tell you.
The look on this girl's face was so priceless. And by me telling you, no, that's the grin you got on your face right there. That's probably the most tame of any of the stories that I would really like to tell, including some of the stories that we had at our company party, which I'm going to leave alone and not go there. Yeah, no. I know. We'll leave that one alone.
Then the following year, Andy, I don't know if you remember or not, but the following year,
same thing.
Your mom kicked me. I mean, she blasted my shin under the table.
Well, it's hard for me to say that you didn't deserve it, but, but that's my point. I wish I could tell. I wish I could tell the story, but we'll leave that one alone for now. So we'll move forward a little bit. So you were an avid hockey player. You were a someone who got deep into martial arts. You're still living up in Connecticut. You moved down to Texas to start as a branch manager. Is that correct, for A.G. Edwards?
No, actually, I worked in Connecticut from 83 to 89. And after the 87 crash, real estate was still going higher. And I was warning people that, real estate was going to collapse. And if you think back to the 1980s, real estate had never anywhere in the country really gone down. I think at that point, the only place real estate had gone down was Texas because of the oil bust. And I saw some things that just were not right. Like my next door neighbor, who was a mailman, I basically, had an idea of what he earned, shows up with this 34-foot boat, which cost probably as much as his house. I just saw, and he borrowed against his house to buy the boat. So I saw the credit being built up, and interest rates were starting to rise again a little bit, which popped the debt bubble, and real estate ultimately did collapse. But I was out to dinner with my wife one night, and I said, we really should move to Texas. Everything's crashed there. We could buy real estate cheap. And, I just always, even as a little kid, I always had interest in horses. And in Connecticut, you could ride a horse, but it's basically, ring riding. And me, I wanted adventure. I wanted to, just ride for miles. And I did. I ended up on one horse. We put over 20,000 miles on together. But I've got a friend of mine who's, I want to say a true cowboy. He told me, he goes, I've heard of many cowboys that have ridden 20,000 miles, but not one ever that rode 20,000 miles on the same horse. So anyway, back in 89, we moved from Connecticut to South Texas, bought a house more than double the size and for half the money. I mean, that's how distressed it was. I bought a house that was 6 months old for $35 a square foot, partially furnished. I mean, how could you lose on that? So that's how I got to Texas. And the very first thing I did when I got to Texas, I had ridden horses, I don't know, maybe half dozen times in Connecticut. But when I got to Texas, I met this woman that she was a trainer. And she basically taught me how to ride. She taught me how to ride, put me on bareback, and told me to put my hands out straight, and had the horse on a lead line and walked it, trotted it, and then cantered it. And it just goes from there. I mean, and that start right there was the beginning of my love of riding bareback, because you're connected with the horse. The horse can feel you, you can feel the horse. As long as it's a good horse, I mean, you should be able to ride a good horse with just an Indian bridle, which is just a rope wrapped around the horse's nose. So that's how I got to Texas. and, and I transferred. Let me give you a little timeline. When I got out of college, I interviewed with 9 different brokerage houses, and this was the summer of 1982, which was the bottom of the recession, and brokers were firing, they were not hiring. So I interviewed with 9 brokers. Every one of them told me, go get some sales experience and come back. So I worked in life insurance, health insurance, property casualty for about a year's time. Then went back, interviewed. I was hired by E.F. Hutton, and actually, there's a little funny story on that, because they interviewed me like, I don't remember, it was 6 or 7 times, and they sent me up to Boston to interview with the regional manager, and we're close to done with the interview, and I just flat out said to him, look, this is my 6th or 7th interview. Either you hire me now, or I'm going to go across the street. I'll work for Merrill Lynch, and I'll be your biggest nightmare. And he hired me. And within, I don't know, it was probably 3 months, 4 months, then E.F. Hutton pled guilty to check kiting, which made trying to do business impossible. So I moved from Hutton to Merrill, worked for Merrill for, I think, 3 years. And then it was just before Christmas, and Merrill comes out and says, they had a big conference call, and they said, we're doing a payout. We're going to change the payout, but it's not a payout cut. Well, I went in basically with a calculator, and it was absolutely a pay cut. And I could have accepted the pay cut, but I can't accept somebody telling me you're so stupid that you don't know this is a pay cut. So I moved to Shearson and worked for Shearson for a couple of years, and that's when I moved, was in '89. I transferred to a Shearson branch in South Texas, and within a year, Shearson restructured, closed a bunch of branches. My branch was one that closed, and that's how I ended up with A.G. Edwards. I worked with A.G. Edwards for 15 years. I got to say, it was the best firm I've ever worked for. I really did, working for the other 3 firms, I really did get to see from the inside. And I guess I'll use the word evil, how evil these firms were. And it was such a breath of fresh air going to A.G. Edwards, because they truly put the customer first. I met Ben Edwards. I played golf with Ben Edwards. He was truly a genuine guy, and the firm reflected that. I was way South Texas. I was down in the Harlingen area at that point. And then in '93, they asked me to be a branch manager in a branch that was failing. So I moved. It was a couple hundred miles north to Victoria, and I worked in Victoria for the last 12 years as branch manager.
Yeah, you always told me that A.G. Edwards were one of the good ones. Let me ask you a question. What did you see from the inside as being a branch manager for over a decade that most folks on the outside would never believe?
Well, one thing is the amount of oversight. I would, as a branch manager, you've got to sign off on everything. You sign off on every single trade, every piece of correspondence going out, every piece of correspondence coming in. I was signing my name 300 times a day. What I did see, because I was privy to upper management, what I did see was how they truly put the customer first. Whereas with E.F. Hutton or Merrill, they pushed the brokers to do the captured products. They pushed people to do, Merrill Lynch funds or whatever, and not necessarily the right things for the customer, but the firm was all about revenue. And A.G. Edwards, of course, they were about revenue, but they figured that if you do the right thing for the customer, more revenue is going to come later, because word of mouth and people being pleased with being treated properly would create more business. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the last of the old school firms where they did put customers first until we got into, I guess, the late 70s and 80s. The whole culture changed.
So you get an inkling, you can talk about what it is that made you decide to want to pick up and leave. And you're going to go and move your family to Costa Rica. Tell me about what happened leading up to that on your trip, I think, to Zurich. You came back. Why'd you go to Zurich? What happened when you came back? It's almost too crazy to believe. But I will say this. Everything you've ever told me has been validated. And some of it is so incredulous, you ask yourself, well, how is that even possible? But if you guys knew Bill Holter, you would understand that craziness follows him, but he always seems to come out smelling like a bag of roses. Tell me a little bit about what happened.
Yeah, that's been my life. And I know where you're wanting this to go. You want to hear the FBI, don't you? All right. Well, let me kind of backtrack just a little bit. I've always analyzed markets, and oftentimes come up, contrarian. And I mean, I had a big position trade going into the crash of 1987 with zero coupon treasury bonds. I built a huge position, and I was catching all kinds of crap because interest rates were going up, the bonds were depreciating, but I just kept buying hand over fist. And rates went as high as 1045, and within 2 weeks after the crash, they were below 8.5. So it was a huge move, and the bonds basically doubled. So I've been a contrarian. In 2005, 2006, I smelled what was coming in 2000. I thought it was going to happen sooner than it did. It took a little longer to unfold. I retired and walked away from the business in November of 2006. And the reason I did that was I had a career, and now I thought about it last night, Andy. In my career, I worked as a broker for 23 years, and I've now been doing, precious metals brokering for since 2011. And I did, I worked on a consulting basis from the 06 when I left to 2011. And I've never had a lawsuit. I've never had a settlement. I've never had an arbitration. And nor did any of my brokers during that 12 years. That's an impossible stat, to go through an entire brokerage career and not have a single, no settlement, no arbitration, no problems whatsoever. And I knew what was coming. I knew the markets were going to crash. And I was, as a branch manager, you're on the hook for every single trade done in the office. So the way I looked at it was, in 2006, I felt that I had enough money to basically walk away, and decided, we started looking, where are we going to go to? But I wanted to exit the US because I was, at that point, I was really pissed off because of what happened after 9/11. They put the Patriot Act, which was written before 9/11, by the way. So I was pretty pissed off living in the United States, watching them strip the population of liberties. So decided to move, and we decided to move to Costa Rica. Well, I had a bunch of gold on hand, and I had some gold held in Delaware Depository, which, that a side note on that, I deposited 2001 coins, and I received 2006 coins. I got coin for coin, didn't lose anything, but they did something with my gold. So anyway, I had two clients up in Connecticut that we wanted to ship metal. We wanted to get metal outside of the United States. So we decided to open accounts in Switzerland. We ended up opening accounts in Basel. So we got to, I've been to Basel quite a few times. But because of Homeland Security, as an individual, you could not ship metal overseas. It had to go through a corporation. It had to go through a company. And of course, Homeland Security had to come into your house and, or the Homeland Security had to go into a business. You had to be a business and make sure you weren't building bombs. They had to make sure you weren't a terrorist in order to ship metal outside of the US. So I had 2 clients in Connecticut. They were business partners. They had a business. And what I did, we were going to ship the metal all together, which we did. I went to Houston Airport, walked through the metal detector, and the guy whispered to me, he goes, "Coins." I said, "Yeah, coins," because it's not illegal. I mean, you know that, to go state to state. And I flew to Connecticut, dropped the metal off, turned around, got on the same plane that 2 hours later, and came back home. I wake up the next morning and I'm upstairs on the computer. My wife comes upstairs and she says, "I don't know if these are 2 asshole buddies of yours or not, but there's 2 guys at the front door. One says he's with the FBI and the other guy says he's from Homeland Security." And I'm like, "What?" So I go downstairs. Yeah, sure enough, it's definitely an FBI guy because the FBI office was in my building. And I knew his partner through Rotary. I didn't know this guy, but I knew his face and he knew my face. And the guy says to me, he goes, "We have information that you may have information of a terrorist event on the East Coast." And I don't know, even looking back now, I don't know whether it was the right thing or the wrong thing, but obviously it was the right thing because nothing ever came of it. But I went like full on Eddie Murphy. And I don't want to swear on air, but
go ahead, swear, man. Go ahead. But let people get to know the real Bill.
Yeah, I just looked at him and burst out laughing. I go, "Get the fuck out of here." and I go, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yes, we're very serious." Well, they were on my front porch for about 20 minutes. And after about, I don't know, it was probably only 3 or 4 minutes, I started to get heated because this is them pushing on me for moving. Oh, and I said to him, I go, "This is because I traveled with gold yesterday, huh?" And he goes, "Oh, we didn't know, we didn't know that." And the Homeland Security guy who had no training, he was like brand new because Homeland Security was brand new. He goes like, he just looks at the FBI guy. He goes, "Oh, he knows why we're here." Long story short, I told the guy, the FBI guy, I said, "Look, this is exactly why I'm leaving the country because of bullshit like this." I said, "If you want, go in my house. It's all boxed up. We're leaving in a week or 10 days or whatever it was. You could break into the boxes if you want. You're welcome to break down my computer, check everything if you want." And he says to me, he goes, "Well, we can't do that because we don't have a warrant." And I basically said, "Bullshit. Doesn't matter whether you have a warrant or not. You use the word terrorism, which means you don't need a warrant." So it ended up, he's asking me, "Well, if you did know of a terrorist event, would you say anything?" And I said, "You're damn right I'd say something. I'm an American patriot. And again, this is exactly why I'm leaving the country, because of stuff like this." So now they leave. Now I've got to fly to Switzerland to meet the metal at the vault. And I got to fly, 2 or 3 days after that to Costa Rica with my family. I am absolutely shitting bricks that I'm on the no-fly list. I mean, I'm taking off to go to Switzerland. I'm on the phone with my wife. I'm like, "We're in the air. We're in the air." I mean, I was really worried that I was going to, get shut down. How am I going to even go to Costa Rica? Am I going to swim? So, went to Switzerland, met the metal, deposited it. And, then 3 or 4 days after I got back, we moved to Costa Rica. And Costa Rica was that's part of my life I would not trade anything for. That was a fun 5 years.
Well, you told me some stories about Costa Rica, and I'm going to touch on a couple of them. First one being, you're there and you're a little concerned when you become proficient enough in Spanish to understand that they really don't love Americans. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My
So
Spanish,
somehow you had an arsenal with you, and you go into your backyard every night and do what?
no, not every night. I did it about every three, either Saturday or Sunday when it got quiet. I would wait till it got quiet, and I'd go out and I had a couple shotguns. Yeah, I had arms, and I had two big black German Shepherds. My driver told me, he goes, Bill, he goes, everybody, because there was a fence line or there was a road and people would walk to and from work, and the dogs would just run up on along the fence line and be barking and growling at people. He's like, Bill, everybody calls you the crazy gringo. And because I would go out every, I don't know, roughly third weekend or whenever I felt like it, and I'd fire off, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 rounds and then go back in. The point was, when it's quiet or, not busy or whatever, because the San Jose area is literally like one big stadium that's 20 miles across, you could hear the echoes of the shots coming back from the other side. So I did that basically, call it warning shots, call it whatever. But yeah, I was known as the crazy gringo in Costa Rica.
Yeah, and at Miles Franklin too. So you're there. This is where you meet your horse. We'll talk about that as well. Well, let's talk about that, because I want to talk about something that happened having dinner with your wife in Costa Rica when you went out for a cigarette. But before we talk about that, you met your horse, and I rode your horse. I wouldn't really call it riding per se. But every day I would call you when you were back in the States. You brought your horse back home. You'll tell us how you met it, but how it came to be. But every morning you would call me on your horse while you were riding your horse. This horse meant an awful lot to you. I know that. So tell me a little bit about the horse, how you met it. I guess that's not even the right word. How it came to be, right, and what it meant to you and to this day.
Yeah, a golf buddy of mine. As soon as I got there, I started looking for a horse, and a golf buddy of mine said, "Well, I've got one that I'm interested in selling," and I rode him. And he was broke. I mean, he was not well trained or anything, but I really liked his gait. He would pick up and flare outwards, which is really a special gait. It's a Spanish gait. So I bought the horse as a trail horse, and that's really all I thought it was going to be. And I was out. We used to go on Sundays. We would go from bar to bar to bar to bar to bar and tie our horses up, go and have a beer or two beers and go to the next bar. By the end of the day, me and the horse were arguing. And this guy comes riding up, and I knew who he was. He was either the best or the second best trainer in the country. And he asked me, he goes, "Would you like me to train your horse for a month for $100? And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." I mean, training in the States would have been, pretty close to $1,000 a month. So he trained him for a month, and then, he asked if I wanted to keep going. I said, absolutely. And he said, it would be best if you ride while I'm training the horse. So what I did was, for 12 months, and this was toward the end of me being in Costa Rica, because I left the horse there for about, I don't know, 10 months or thereabouts, which was good because he would have died in the fire that took my house when we moved back. But anyway, so truly this horse was turned into a show horse. I mean, he was Spanish dressage. He did Paso Español. He did Piaffe, did Passage, and he did something special that made him, if he was not gelded, he was $500,000. And I paid $2,000 for this horse, but he was $500,000 horse all day long, because I could get him to change leads on a gallop or a canter on every step. So he's going like that. That is an absolute top level dressage gait. So I worked with him and rode for about 12 months, and then and got to the point where we decided to move back. And I left him with a trainer for another 9 or 10 months or whatever, because we'd moved the furniture, had everything moved, and I did want him to continue training with this guy. And by the way, the trainer, I asked him after 2 or 3 months, I said, would it be better to train him twice a day? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely. But I didn't think you wanted to spend the extra $100 per month. So, moved back. And when I moved back in May,
why did you move back?
Oh, we moved back because my Spanish got good enough. I mean, I could talk to 2 or 3 people in a conversation and understand, not be left behind. And oftentimes I would play dumb, and people would be talking about me or talking about gringos or whatever in the conversation, thinking that I wasn't going to catch it. And I mean, they would smile at you because they like you spending your money, but they didn't really like Americans. And it was my thought that because Costa Rica's central bank, all of their reserves were dollars, I viewed that once things go bad, gringos would be targets. And I still believe that. When things go bad, expats are going to be, they're going to be targets.
Yeah, that's scary. So before you go back, tell the story how you decided to go out and have a cigarette at the restaurant with your wife and what happened.
Yeah. And of course, it was my fault because I was a gringo. Went out to dinner at the only 5-star restaurant in Costa Rica. It's an old monastery way up on top of a mountain. Then they have this beautiful grass area it's probably a 40-foot high and maybe 20-foot wide green cross that pretty much the whole valley could see. So we went out there before dinner, went in, had dinner. We'd finished dinner and ordered dessert. And I went out the back door where we had been before, and the sidewalk to the grassy area was straight, but there was a sidewalk off to the left. So I'm thinking, well, I already went this way. Let me see what's this way. What was to the left turn was a sidewalk that went exactly 3 paces. They stopped building it because it was a straight down 10-foot drop. And I walked right off of it. There was no lights, no chain, no nothing. I fell, broke my back. They wanted to carry me out. I'm like, no way. I knew there was something wrong with my back. So I actually walked out of the long way, went to they sent an ambulance, went to the hospital, and the guy says to me, he goes, well, you're really lucky. You didn't break anything. Everything's good. I stood up. I said, fine. And I'm going home. I took 3 steps. I said, I had such pain. I said, no, I think I'll spend the night here. Well, 2:00 in the morning, my phone rings. I reach over to pick up the phone, and on the other line was, this was really lucky for me. It was the orthopedic surgeon that was the best in the country. It happened to be the vice president's son, who was schooled in Washington State and interned at Baylor. So this guy was the top notch. And he says to me, he goes, don't move. You broke your back. And if you move wrong, you could be paralyzed. Well, I had just reached over to pick up the phone. And he said, don't just press the button. Don't get up to go to the bathroom. Don't move. Don't do anything. He goes, you need surgery tomorrow morning. So that's, and afterwards, of course, the judge or the courts or whatever, they said it was my fault because I was drunk, and a non-drunk person would not have walked off the sidewalk. I mean, it was completely dark, no chain, no nothing. I had 2 beers, but I was a gringo.
Yeah. And that accident has, certainly changed your life, made it, difficult maybe to do the things you wanted to do. Physically,
not so much.
but then I remember just a couple of years ago, I've been looking for the video as I've been talking to you, a video of a drone flying overhead as you are doing martial arts, breaking boards
It's
at
Bill
60
Holter.
years old.
It's Bill Holter with a new hip on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, and that just so when the surgery for my back, that was I've had 4 surgeries where I had metal put in. First one, I got 2 screws in my right wrist from breaking a horse. The lady left the electric fence on. My belt got caught on a Western saddle, which I'll never ever ride a Western saddle again. Anyway, came off, broke my wrist. I blew my knee training in martial arts. I blew my ACL and LCL. That's 5 pieces of metal. My back was 10 pieces of metal. And in 2017, that's when the video was done. I had a hip replacement. So it brought the total to 23 pieces of metal in my body. And I just got done in January with it's called a laminectomy. I had bone spurs growing on 3 separate vertebrae below where the break was, on both sides. But that's the only surgery I've had that I didn't walk away with more metal. I mean, I get near a metal detector and it goes off.
You really think you rode a horse 20,000 miles?
I know I did. I did the math. I was riding 3 to 5 miles a day, minimum 6 days a week. And I did that from 2012 until 2023. So 11 years. I mean, just do the math. It's 20,000 miles. And I mean, there were some days where I'd ride as much as 25, 30 miles. And that, by the way, the reason here in Texas that a lot of the towns are anywhere from 20, 30, 40 miles apart is because that's how far a horse could ride in one day, comfortably.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, every single day I would talk to you were on your horse with your phone that no one can believe he still uses a flip phone. We call it Brontosaurus. I do believe that you rode that much, and unfortunately, your horse is no longer with us. I'm sorry. I know that was like a brother to a sister, right?
Absolutely.
A sister to you. But nonetheless, we move on. Before I get into things a little bit more recent, you've had some big moments where you were completely against the consensus and ended up being right. Do any of these stand out for you? Any of these things that you were one of the only ones calling it came out to be true? Any of these stand out for you?
Yeah, the first one was building the zero coupon treasury position into the rates going higher just before the crash. And when the markets crashed, rates within, I think, 4 months or thereabouts were sniffing at 7% from 1045. And the leverage on zero coupon treasuries, people more than doubled their money in a very short period of time. And of course, the higher rates ended up popping the real estate market. So, I mean, I was definitely against consensus there. I mean, when we decided to move to Texas, my first wife worked at a real estate company and told people we're going to move to Texas. And of course, people asked why. And she said, because Bill thinks real estate's going to crash. She came home crying because everybody told her that I was a complete idiot fool. Well, the real estate market crashed, and by 91, 92 on the East Coast, I mean, there was bankruptcies everywhere. So that was one. The next one was the .com bubble. Like I said before, in my office, we did not have any big concentrated positions in any of the .coms. So we walked through it, without any problems. And of course, people were telling me, you're an idiot, you're missing this. Well, I missed that, but I also missed the collapse because I knew it was fake. And then, of course, probably the biggest one was me leaving the country late 2006. And I felt really bad in, I think it was February or March of 07. A.G. Edwards got bought out. And because I was under 50 years old, their policy was you don't get paid for your book, and your options that are vested, you don't get them because you're under 50. So I walked away, and I was thinking to myself, well, all I had to do was stay another 3 or 4 months, and I had well over $1 million in what the options would have been worth when A.G. Edwards was bought out by, I believe it was Wachovia, and then Wachovia was bought out by Wells Fargo. So I was kind of bummed out about that, but within, what was it, 8 months or 10 months, Wachovia went under, and the options became worthless. So I didn't feel so bad. But that was certainly against consensus. People told me I was absolutely out of my mind, that I'd leave the job that I had, leave the country, based on what people said could never happen, which of course it did. And it's going to happen this time way worse. I do want to say this. What I missed, the biggest thing that I missed, was after or going into the 07, 08, 09 great financial crisis, I never believed that the central banks and sovereign treasuries would basically bankrupt their balance sheets, saving the system. They did save the system, but now just look at the balance sheets of every major central bank in the world. They're all insolvent. Who's going to be the white knight now? There is none.
Right. Well, in other words, you've always been a contrarian and trusted your own gut. You do things that make sense to you. You don't follow the herd. I know that about you. In fact, if I would think of one way to describe you, it's someone who doesn't follow the herd. You are a trailblazer in every respect, but a very good person.
That was the last thing my dad said to me on his deathbed. He said, "Trust your gut." He goes, "You got a good gut."
You do, and in every way. And you're also deep down a very, very good person with a very hard shell, but you're buttercup inside. I know that about you. And so along the way, Bill, somehow, some way, you got into gold. What was the light bulb moment, or was it more of a slow awakening? What got you into gold?
I'm going to say what started me off on my digging financially. I can tell you it was the very first class in college. It was Economics 101. I opened up the book. I think it was a Keynesian book. And I can still see it at the bottom of the first page, and it went to the top of the second page. It said, "We don't know why the Great Depression happened, but we do know it can never happen again." And that was my first business moment calling bullshit. I'm like, if you don't know why it happened, how can you say it can never happen again? And I'm in college digging, researching, and I came to realize it was debt. It was too much debt, too much leverage in the system. And then, of course, I realized that the dollar was at that point, this was 1978, and we'd gone off Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. So that's what gave me interest in gold. And then when I was at Merrill Lynch, I forget what his title was, but he was basically, you call him chief economist or whatever, a guy by the name of Stan Salvikson, really brilliant guy, was talking about real estate popping, talking about the debt levels were starting to rise. And he peeled off and started Comstock Partners with Aronson, and I forget who the other guy was, but basically they made money during the crash. And Salvikson talked about, the foundation of everything was treasuries, and they are fallible. And we know they're fallible now because the U.S. is going to pay like $1.5 trillion in interest. I mean, it's mathematically it's unsustainable. And he talked about it at that time. And this would have been 1987, 88. And he said, really, the only true foundation is gold. So now I'm digging and looking at gold, and I'm buying a little bit here, buying a little bit there, putting 5 or 10% in all the portfolios because that's, that was the recommendation. And then came 1997, when gold went under $335 an ounce. That was the cost of production. And just like buying my house in South Texas at $35 a square foot, if you buy something cheaper than it can be replaced, at some point in time, you're going to make money. So 1997 is where I personally went in all in gold, silver, miners, and then I started building a pretty big position in the miners and gold and silver. And I was shipping gold, shipping silver out to customers. And I guess an additional factor to me being frustrated and leaving in 2006 was, as a branch manager, I was getting a call probably every 2 weeks from compliance saying, what are you doing? You're buying all this gold. You're shipping the assets out. And of course, they wanted the assets in-house because they get paid on assets in-house. And I knew at the time, get it out to the customer. So I went all in at 335 and then learned more and more about, why gold, why, basically it's a real foundation. It's a foundation that cannot bankrupt. And that's the problem today, is the foundation is quicksand.
So I got a few more questions to ask you, Billy, but one that I'd like to know, I hope I know the answer, is out of all the firms out there that would love to work with you, why my company, why Miles Frankton, and what felt different about it then, and what's kept you here all these years?
Well, that's easy. I mean, I met you and David. You and I were talking on the phone. I obviously checked, and you had, there were absolutely zero lawsuits, complaints. You two are men of your word, and I'm a man of my word. I've done business. I much prefer to do business on a handshake, because contracts are made to be broken. Somebody writes a contract, and they put a little trap door in it, and there you have it. You just got screwed. So I'm a handshake guy. You're a handshake guy. That's what drew me. That's what kept me. I can't imagine working, with anyone else.
I love you for saying that, and I truly do. And you're the last person that I would ever disappoint. But quite frankly, anyone who considers himself a business person and isn't a handshake guy or gal ain't much of a business person, or much of a man or woman that has anything to stand behind. So I appreciate it. I was just curious on that.
Andy, originally in 2011, we moved back from Costa Rica in May, and our house burned down at the end of, or the beginning of September. That wildfire took 1,700 houses, and I'm fighting with the insurance. It took over a year to get all the insurance money paid out. And I called you, and you knew who I was because I had written for GATA from 2007 to 2011. So you knew who I was, you knew what my writings were. And I said, do you have any use for a writer? And you said, yeah, absolutely. And actually, let me go back. When I was writing for GATA, I signed off as Bill H. I didn't even want to put my name on it because it was controversial. And I'll never know who the client of mine was, but I was writing for about, call it 24 clients that I kept on a consulting basis. And somehow, some way, it got to Bill Murphy, it got to Chris Powell at GATA, and they started posting. Every time I wrote something, poof, it would post. And then it started to spread. And I don't think I've told this story publicly. I don't think I've ever told this story. In 2011, Bill Murphy invited me to go to the GATA conference in London. It was sponsored by Eric Sprott, and the four big speakers were Eric Sprott, his partner John Embry, James Turk, and Jim Sinclair. My four heroes in business. I mean, my absolute top four heroes. So I get there, And I meet Eric Sprott. I'm out having a cigarette. Eric comes out and has a cigarette. And I talked with him one-on-one for 45 minutes. And I was kind of surprised he even knew who I was. And then I had another session with him for 45 minutes. I walked inside one day, and there's James Turk talking with a bunch of people. And I just walked up to him and introduced myself to him. I said, I'm Bill Holter. I write for, I've written for GATA under the name Bill H. He goes, oh, you're Bill H. He goes, let me tell you something. If I'm jammed for time and don't have time to read anything, if you've written, I read it. I was like, wow. And then John Embry, before the conference.
What a cool guy John Embry is.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. He emailed me and asked me if we were going to come a few days early, which we did because my wife wanted to sightsee London. And he asked if we would like to have dinner with him and his wife. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is, I guess, kind of a burn on my wife. John finishes dinner. He pushes back. He goes, I can't believe I just had dinner with the smartest man in the world. I looked at my wife. I said, John, I didn't quite hear you. Can you say So, and then of course I met Jim, and Jim remembered me from 8 years earlier at his first conference. He goes, hi, it's good to see you again.
Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. I'll never forget that day you called me.
Hey, Andy, let me just finish this. And you're going to be surprised that I admit to this because I cried like a baby. The final night of
that's going to be the name of this podcast. Bill Holter cried like a baby.
There you go. No, it was the final night. We got done, go up to the room. My wife goes into the bathroom, starts to take her makeup off. And I sat on the bed. I started crying. I mean, crying. I'm bawling. Tears coming down my face. My wife comes out. She goes, what's wrong? This should be the best moment of your life. I said, you don't understand. I didn't even know I was relevant. And my 4 heroes know who I am and they respect my work. I mean, it was quite a time for me.
Yeah, I bet it was. The power of the internet is amazing. I've learned that. And by the way, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Bill Murphy and Chris Paul, any of us who are involved with precious metals. I try and say that very often. And I mean that sincerely. I want to just go back for 1 second, because if there was anything worthy of mentioning in such a horrible thing, when in Bastrop, your entire neighborhood burnt down, everything, including your golf clubs and your cars burnt down. But what was the one thing left standing?
Gold and silver.
You sent me tubes of silver eagles that had been melted to nothing.
Yep.
And we would pry them open, and they were covered in the green plastic, and we'd hit them out, and we were able to give you basically melt value for that. Of everything gone, the silver and gold inside your safe remained. I always think about that.
Yep.
You can't even burn this stuff away. So, all right, now we fast forward. You're writing my newsletter, and you call me one day and you say, Andy, my hero, Jim Sinclair, has asked me to partner. Is that pretty much accurate?
Yeah, let me give you the full story on this. And I have told this publicly before. It was March 17th of 2015, St. Patrick's Day. Well, actually, the day before St. Patrick's Day, your dad called me and he told me, business is really slow. We're cutting everybody's salary and pay except for yours. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's really cool. But then I thought another 2 seconds, I'm like, but that means I'm next. So I called Jim and I asked him, do you know of anybody who would want the rights to my writings? And he gave me a 2-word answer. Yeah, me. So, I'm pretty excited because he's Mr. Gold. I mean, he was the most famous gold guy in the English speaking world. But what I didn't realize was I thought he wanted me to write for him. I didn't realize he wanted me to be his partner. And that was, that was pretty cool.
there's a picture of the three of us at a conference in Los Angeles. God rest Jim's soul. He was quite a guy, and you're right, Mr. Gold was his nickname. What do you think it was about your partnership with Jim that was so special? What about? Tell me one story about Jim along the way that you'll remember forever, that the people would like to know. Maybe they have no idea.
Oh, well, Jim was a super charitable guy. I mean, even his company. I mean, they built schools in Tanzania. Jim was a super charitable guy, and helped people that were down on their luck. I mean, I saw that quite a few times. So I mean, I think that's the best thing I can say, is that he was just really a good-hearted guy. And super smart. I mean, no doubt about it. Super, super smart. And actually, when I was writing for GATA, I started sending a copy of each article to Jim. And then Jim started writing back to me, asking me questions, because he wanted to find out if I really knew what I was talking about, or if I was just spitting something out that I had heard. Then that my articles. So I learned a lot from him, and hopefully Jim learned some from me.
So the last thing before I ask you the last question, when I think of our times together like this, we get to Boston to go see the World Series. We stay at your sister's house.
Yeah.
And it's raining and cold. And this is every time we go to, something crazy happens. So the guy in front of us.
Yep, I remember it well.
He's doing this, and then he goes like this. And I'm like, oh my God, he just swallowed his throat. This is going to get bad. And he leans back on you, and you give him a little shove. What happens next?
He puked all over the person in front of him, directly on top of his head, and it just rolled right down his back.
That's the kind of stuff. Every time I'm with you, something exciting happens. That's why I wish I got to spend a little more time with you, because there's always something funny and noteworthy to talk about, Bill. I mean, I do. I love you like a brother, and there's so many things that I think about on our journey together, and there's a lot more things that we're doing now together, and I'm very excited about what we have coming, which we'll leave that for another time. But you're one of the most colorful, conviction-driven people I've ever met. Whether we're talking the ice rink, to the trading desk, to the saddle, to Madison Square Garden, to the bars in where is it called? The Masters, to all of this stuff. Last question: when you look back on it all, brother, what's the one thing you hope people really understand about you, not just as a good guy, which you are, but as a person? And I'm going to preempt that and say one of the things that I admire the most about you, you've been very successful in your life, and you have spent a lot of time feeding homeless and helping build homeless shelters, right, and donating to churches. You're very philanthropic, not just with your wealth, but with your time. What's one thing that you would hope people would really understand about you as a person?
I've said this forever, that you come into this world with only one thing, and that's a clean name, your good name. And how you exit the earth depends on how you conducted yourself, whether or not you have a clean name or not. And I would just hope that, when all is said and done, I'm remembered as, was always honest, always honorable in all my dealings.
Yeah, the only time I've ever seen you angry are when people go back on their word. Whether, I mean, and exactly. I've seen that.
Exactly.
I've seen that people who you've done business with have done that, and it's the only time I've ever really seen you get angry. And to me, that says a lot about you, because the worst thing you can do is to break your word
Right.
Bill, you're an extraordinary guy. I hope people watching this will continue to dig deeper into what you have to offer. What's the best way for everyone to follow what you're doing?
Oh, you can go to my website, billholter.com. Or if you want to contact me directly, there is a contact button on the site, but if you want to contact me directly, my business email is bholter@proton.me.
Yeah, I never know which email. You have like 4 of them. I never know which one to send to, but I'll use that one from now on. In any case, Bill, this has been fun. Most of these stories I knew and have loved, and some of them I've lived with you, but I just wanted people to get a better sense of what you're all about. I think when I look back at people who along the way that I followed, like Richard Russell, I always enjoyed most understanding who he was as a person. And he built that into his writing, talking about being a bombardier in World War II, or his cactuses or his standard poodles or whatever. And I think same thing here is true about you, because I think you can really appreciate the information you're giving to people when you know a little bit more about the person behind it. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't get any more honorable and colorful than you. And I thank you for going down memory lane with me for an hour. And I can't wait to post this and let everyone hear about it. I'm going to think of a very good name of this. And, you might get a little aggravated with me when I come up with the name, but it's only out of...
Not probably like a baby.
All right, fine. Maybe it'll have something to do with Buttercup. We'll see. But Bill,
surprise me.
Yeah, I wish you the best, my brother, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, man.
Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.